Hello, welcome to Seeking the Kingdom of God channel. Today we are going to continue with the teaching of radical giving. Today is part 5. And if you've liked the teaching this far, I'd encourage you to like the video, share the video, comment on the video, especially on YouTube, and subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon. I look forward to having you through this teaching and through all the other teachings that are going to come up in the future. So let's get into the Bible right away and check out the next personality in the Bible who was the subject of radical giving by God, or who was the object of God's love. And that's the reason he gave to him radically. So let's take a look at Jacob. Jacob is Isaac's son. And like Isaac's birth was miraculous, so Jacob's birth was also miraculous. Let's take a look at how that happened. So we are going to be in the book of Genesis, chapter 25, and we're going to read from verse 20 onwards. So Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel and the sister to Laban the Syrian. And Isaac entreated, meaning prayed, the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. So you can see, before the time that Isaac prayed to God, Rebekah had no ability to bear children. She was a barren woman, very much like Sarah. Sarah was barren too. That is, Isaac's mother was barren too. In Isaac's case, so was Rebekah. But then Isaac prayed to God, and Rebekah was able to conceive children. All right. So, and she conceived, and the children, verse 22, and the children struggled within her, and she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. She felt like there was a lot of turmoil in her womb. So she wanted to know who to go, why it was like that. And she went to God. Well, in that day and age, people went to God, apparently, especially those who believed in him, and not to the midwife, to God. So she went to God, and the Lord said to her, two nations are in thy womb, and two manner of people shall be separated from your bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. So this is what was God's answer to her question, that why is she having this turmoil in her womb. She told her that she was going to bear twins. There are two nations that were coming out of her. So I can imagine that being true, because in that time and age there were hardly many people on earth, and so everybody who was born was probably the father of one nation and another. So in the case of Rebekah, two nations were coming out of her womb. And the important thing to notice here is God tells her the elder shall serve the younger. So it was already determined by God who was going to lead among the twins, right? Normally, the elder would lead, but in this case, he appointed the younger to lead. Why? Because he's God. He wants it to be like that, and he is determined it for a purpose. What is the purpose? We'll get to know in a while. Actually, people got to know in history what happened and why the younger will lead and the elder shall serve the younger. To sort of preface the desire of God, to sort of tell everybody about what was happening here. This was actually a type, an indication of what was going to happen, of what was going to come in the future. In the future, in our age, when we are going to be born, so our elder brother, those who believe in Jesus, our elder brother is Jesus Christ. And if you look at the words that are there, it says there, elder shall serve the younger. When Jesus Christ died on the cross, he died not for himself, he died for us, his younger siblings, who were going to be part of the family of God, whom God was going to call his children because of Jesus Christ. He was going to serve us by giving up his life for us, by taking on our sin on himself, by taking on our poverty on himself, by taking on our disease, all the effects of sin on himself. He was going to do that and serve us with righteousness, serve us with healing, health, riches, and what have you. All those things that come from God the Father was going to be served to us free of cost because of what Jesus did, because of his service to us on the cross when he gave himself up, and he bore the punishment that was due us. He bore that punishment, and when he bore that punishment, we became free to live as children of God, to live without being bound to sin, without being bound to uh, uh, bound to thoughts and impulses, impulses which hold us captive. We are impulsive. We cannot help ourselves from keep ourselves from doing harm to others and to ourselves. So he took on all those things and allowed himself to be bound on the cross, and in a way showed us that when we before if we don't accept his service for ourselves, we also are like him. When he was bound to the cross, he couldn't help him. Somebody else bound him, somebody else nailed him to the cross, and he couldn't budge, he couldn't move. And that was what sin had done for us. Sin had done to us, not for us. Sin had done to us. No matter how much we wanted to get off sin's bandwagon, we couldn't get ourselves off it. We were bound to it. We were bound to it in our emotions. We were bound to it in our thoughts. We were bound to it in our hearts. We were bound to it. Our hearts were hard. We couldn't help but do wrong. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't do right all the time. And if we did right, we did it so that we could be, we were having selfish motives. The moment anybody, any of us who were bound to sin, had to choose between ourselves and somebody else, we would always choose ourselves. So that is how sin was treating us, and that is what Jesus bore on the cross. He allowed himself to be bound like us to sin, and then when he couldn't move, he took on himself the consequences of becoming like us. And when he did that, he served us, his younger brothers and sisters who would believe in him. And when he did that, he at the ultimate service he did was he bore death. He wasn't meant for death. He was life itself. But he submitted to be bound to the cross like sin was binding us, and to face death, to accept death. And then when he accepted death fully, it was like as though death couldn't contain him. That was another part of his service. Death couldn't contain him because he had faced all that was meant for us, and he was still triumphant because he was life. So he came back to life, and his service then continued in the sense he gave us that life. He imparted to us that life. And now we have that life in us because we believe in him. And he continued that service. Can you see? He's continuing the service. Even today, you will find verses in the Bible that says, even today, Jesus is interceding for people who believe in him in heaven. So even today, he's rendering service to his younger brothers and sisters. So the thing that happened when after he rose again, he was serving us. He gave us his life. Then when he went back to heaven, he didn't stop his service. He sent his Holy Spirit to live in us so that we would be served further and become witnesses to the fact that he was alive, and he was our elder brother, and he was doing exactly what was predicted in the Bible about the elder serving the younger. I believe that is one of the most amazing things that God set a type for in the story of Jacob. We can sit here and crib. Why did the elder have to serve the younger? Why did it have to be like that? Why couldn't the younger be blessed anyway? The younger couldn't have been blessed. You see, the younger was on his way to die, and only the elder could help the younger. So that is the type of Jacob's birth. Now, while we have looked at the spiritual part of it, let's look at the physical part of it. If God has promised Rebecca, and because if it's a promise to her, she would have related it to Isaac. She would have related it to the children who were born to her, that you were born to me, but the elder will serve the younger. So Isaac knew about this will of God, so did his children. But then what happened was none of them submitted to God about it. If they had, a lot of trouble, a lot of heartache could have been saved, but they didn't. None of them submitted to God. So Rebecca kept it in her heart. Jacob kept it in his heart. I'm supposed to be the leader here. Rebecca kept it in her heart, saying, my younger son is supposed to lead, but Isaac and Esau, the older son, Jacob's elder brother, they had no willingness to submit to God and find out, how do you want this to happen? Show us so that we can start living like that right away. They didn't do it. And so what happens? What happens is they are delivered, the children are delivered, the elder is named Esau, and the younger is named Jacob, and life goes on. And as they grow up, what happens is Esau is a very outgoing extrovert, fond of sport, fond of physical activity, loves doing things which require physical prowess, and so is always constantly moving, and hungry, right? Hungry. And that's what happens if you're physically very active. Nothing to feel bad about. It's the way we are made. Jacob was the opposite. Jacob was the one who stayed at home, who did other things which were not did not require physical prowess, but was work as well. And he had probably helped his mother out, because it ended up that one day he was boiling some stew made out of red lentils. That is dal for all of us in India. Lal masoor ki dal, lentil, red soup, red lentil soup. That is what he was cooking one day. And Esau comes back from his outside activities, very hungry, probably has been sweating it out somewhere, hunting or what, playing or whatever. Comes in hungry and sees uh, Jacob boiling that red stew and says, "Give me some of that. I'm very hungry." Now, what happens? Remember, we talked about how Jacob kept in his heart that he was supposed to lead, and that there was nothing happening in the environment which was making him lead. That he was always having to play second fiddle to his brother. His father loved his brother more than he loved him, because he was the firstborn. All of those things had started to work on Jacob's mind. So he decided, now's the chance. Let me manipulate my brother to sell me his birthright of being the elder one. So what he did is he tells Esau, I will give you this lentil soup on the condition that you sell me your birthright. My lentil soup for your birthright. And so Esau is so careless. He says, what will I do with my birthright? I don't have any need for it. I need soup just now. I need food. I need to fill my hungry stomach. So yeah, you take my birthright. You can have it, and I'll take the lentil soup. So he does do that and makes a very foolish mistake, considering that it was a birthright that was his because of being the elder. People don't think twice when they utter words which are very foolish, which are very impulsive. They do it because they're looking, like I said, we always look at ourselves. We want to protect ourselves. We want to feed ourselves. We want to make sure that our needs are met. And so we'll say, what will I do with something that is in the future that I don't even know how it looks like? I don't want that. I want what I want right now. I want it now, and I will have it. Yeah. So something like what we do in this credit card world. So we want it now. We may not have the money. So we fetch our credit card and said, so I'm going to use it. I don't care if I have the money in the future to return to the credit card company or not. I want it now. I'll have it. Well, something like that. That's what Esau was doing. So he sold his birthright, had the lentil soup, and totally forgot about it. But neither did Jacob forget about it, nor did Rebecca forget about it. They knew that Esau had made a big blunder, and they were going to hold it against him anyway. Okay, so you can imagine, it must not have been a very pleasant household to live in, where two people are at loggerheads with two other people in the household. Not a very good idea. Very similar to what Rebecca was experiencing in her womb when the two children were struggling against each other. So they brought the struggle out into the world, in the world that they were living in. None of them wanted to submit to God. Neither did Jacob and Rebecca submit to God. They didn't pray to God. She went to pray to God when she wanted to find out what was happening in the womb. She didn't go to pray to God about how He's going to bring about His word in their lives. Can you tell me how will you do this will? Show me what I should do now. No, she didn't inquire. They were all very unpleasantly at each other's throats. So, long story short, another time that it happens that when Isaac is very old, he wants to, give away his wealth. He wants to sort of, make sure that the people behind leaves behind, his sons, follow his directions and do what he wants them to do. So he calls Esau and tells him to to bring him something from his hunting, some food that he would have, some game that he hunts, and to cook it for him and bring it, because he loves game. He loves the kind of food that Esau gets to eat because of the fact that he's a hunter. So he says, bring me what you hunt and cook it for me and give it to me so that I can bless you. So now what happens is, Rebecca and Jacob, when Esau steps out to hunt, decide this is the time to cheat Isaac. They had Jacob had finished manipulating Esau to sell him his birthright. Now it looked like Isaac was never going to consider God's will that Jacob should lead the household. He was always going to consider Esau the first, and he is going to make sure that he led the household. So what did he do? He said, my father is not going to give me something that is mine. I have already acquired the birthright. I have it now, and he's not going to even honor God. So let me cheat him. And with the help of his mother, he does. And Isaac, because he is half blind with age, can't see can't see who is blessing. Even though he recognizes the voice, he can't help but uh, fall prey to the whole plan that Jacob and his mother had hatched to cheat Isaac and to lie to him, deceive him into blessing Jacob. What they had done was, they made sure that Jacob was dressed in Esau's clothes, so that even though the voice may not match Esau's, but the smell of the clothes, the smell of the field, the smell of the hunt, all of that would be on Esau's clothes. And because he wore Esau's clothes, he wouldn't be able to figure out who he was blessing. So they went to that extent in deceiving him, acquired the blessing of Esau. Jacob acquires it and sets Esau into a rage. When Esau finds out that he's been cheated, when Isaac finds out that he's been deceived, neither of them can help it. The blessing is gone. There is nothing Isaac can do because he is blessed of God. Isaac is blessed of God. So whatever Isaac speaks to whomever he speaks it to will happen for that person. So Jacob was going to be blessed anyway because of what Isaac had done. He had fallen prey to Jacob's deception, and he had blessed him anyway. There was nothing he could do to retract it. You can imagine, in that day and age, the the word of somebody meant a lot. Today, you look at this and say, "Oh, how does it matter? It's just a word." He could have changed it, and he could have told Isaac, "None of what I say to you really is going to work because you cheated me. So I'm going to bless Esau the same blessing." No, it didn't work that way. That's the reason they had a time when somebody's word was as binding as a contract. You didn't ever go back on your word. That was the power of the word once upon a time. Now we have to resort to contracts to hold somebody to their word. And we have to resort to going to courts of law to hold somebody to their word. At that time, they didn't need it. Everybody who said it had to follow what they did, what they said, because the their word was law. Well, anyway, so the whole cheating thing happened, and Isaac has to run away from his home, being afraid of his brother, elder brother Esau, thinking that he's going to kill him because of what he did. And his mother too aids him in it. And his father is told that Jacob is going to fetch himself a wife. So he lets him go anyway. So one thing comes to another, and Jacob goes to his uncle's house, Rebecca's brother's house, Laban's house, and there he spends a lot of time with his uncle, and in the process falls in love, marries, has children, and gets cheated by his father-in-law. So he falls in love with his uncle's children, uncle's daughters, two of them, and he marries them. He falls in love with one. He marries the other because his father-in-law cheats him, deceives him into marrying the other daughter as well. So you can imagine what Jacob had set in process was coming back to him multiple fold. So he had cheated his brother, he manipulated his brother, he had deceived his father, manipulated him, got all the blessings that was going to come to him anyway by God's will, but he didn't want to know from God how that would happen. He manipulated the promise so that he could acquire it before the time that it was supposed to come to him. So that's what happens. So on his way to go and meet his uncle, uh, at a certain point, before he meets his uncle, before he meets his future wives and things like that, he stops at a point, and he stops at a certain place called Bethel. And there he lies down and falls asleep. When he falls asleep, he sees in a dream a ladder that is set up on earth and reaches the heaven, and he sees on that ladder uh, angels of God ascending and descending on it. So we find this in the book of Genesis, chapter 28, verses 11 and 12. So when he sees that, he is awed, and he's so awed, and he's still dealing with this awe when the Lord appears to him and speaks to him, appears to him in the dream. The Lord appears to him above the ladder and tells him things, and he tells him the following, the verse 13 onwards. I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your descendants. So apparently, God's promise still held. It didn't matter what Jacob had done before. So, isn't that interesting? We'll talk about that in a minute. Also, your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth, meaning that there'll be as many as that. You can't really count dust, can you? There are so many particles, you can't count them. So, they'll be as numerous as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and the east and to the north and the south. You will have so many people. You'll spread out in all directions, and in you and your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. It's the same promise that he gave Abraham and he gave Isaac, and it's the same promise for Jacob as well. So Jacob was still in the plan of God as a person who was the carrier of the blessing that had come to Abraham. It was not Esau. God didn't say this to Esau. He told this to Jacob. So the plan wasn't off even now. The plan was still on in God's heart and God's mind. The plan was still on. Jacob was the subject or the object of that plan being put into place here on earth. It didn't matter what Jacob did. We'll find out a little in a while why. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go. I am the one who's with you. Don't think that you have been deserted, you have been forsaken. Don't think that. I will keep you wherever you go, no matter wherever you're going now or wherever you will go in the future. I'm the one who will keep you and will bring you back to this land. No matter where you go, you'll come back to this land, and I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. It's like my word is law. This is going to happen. No matter where you go, you will come back here, and my promise will work itself out in your life. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and they'll spread out in every direction. You won't be able to count them, and you will see that whatever I've spoken to you will come to pass. That is the confidence with which God tells him this. Now, how does that affect Jacob? In the Bible, there's a verse in another book called the book of Romans, in chapter 2, verse 4, that it says, it's the goodness of God that leads people to repentance. It's not the accusation of God which leads to people to repentance. If God had told Isaac or Jacob, what did you do? You did such a rotten job of everything. You shouldn't have done all of this. You'd have come to me. I would have told you how it will work out. I would have told you to live the right ways, that it would work out anyway. I did it with Abraham. I did it with Isaac. I would have done it with you. No, he didn't say anything of the sort. He instead told him what was in store for him. Now, that really impacts Jacob so very deeply. He wakes up from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Oh my God, he is real. I've till now only heard from my father and grandfather about this God who spoke to them. Today, I have experienced him, and I know he is here, and I didn't know about it till now. This is the first time I've come across him. And he was afraid, and he said, how awesome. What is this afraid? He's afraid because God didn't do any of those expected things that we would expect God to do. Harangue him, accuse him, charge him, make sure he gets punished. That's what we would do, right? We would do to people who disobey us, our children even. That's what we would do. But that's not how God dealt with Jacob. He told Jacob what is in store for him. If you remember, we talked about it in the book of Job as well. God's vision of us, God's identity of us doesn't change. He holds that intact. And that is what he continues to raise us towards. When he speaks to us, he blesses us, he continues to be good to us, no matter how evil we have been, no matter how terrible our life has been. He continues to be good to us. And through Christ, he does it so very um, unreservedly. He doesn't hold back because Christ has taken away our sins. So he doesn't stop being good to us. And he holds us to that identity. What you're doing now is not where I see you. What you're doing now is not your identity. What I see you as, that is your identity. Come up here. Come up to me. Come up to this part where I see you. When you come up here, you don't have to do the things that you are prone to do. You don't have to manipulate the system to get what you want. You will get it anyway. Just come up here. That was what he was trying to communicate to Jacob through this dream. So uh, uh, Jacob says, and he was afraid, and he said, how awesome is this place. He assigns the place the awesomeness uh, because of God's presence there. But the place was awesome because God was present, not because it was not as though God was present because the place was awesome. It is the other way around. Okay, how awesome is this place? There is none other than the house of, this is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So he assigns that place a lot of value because God appeared to him there. Then Jacob rose early in the morning and he built a memorial to that place. And then he tells God, he makes a vow to God. So the vow is just this. What he says is, if God will be with me and keep me, God had just finished telling him that he will be with him. So it's like as though Jacob can't believe that it could be the truth. So he responds to him, if you really mean what you say and are with me, if God will be with me and keep me in this way that I'm going, keep me on this route that I'm taking, and give me bread to eat, clothing to put on, so that I come back to my father's house in peace, not in strife, not in quarrel, but in peace. That means to say, he's hoping in the future that he won't have to face his brother's wrath, brother's anger, or his father's anger even. So he will be able to come back to his father's house in peace. Then the Lord shall be my God. Till now, he is Lord, he is Master. He'll also be my God, my source, the source from whom I came. I will accept him as that blindly. Now he's my Lord, he's my Master, because he's promised something to me that I would like to take him up on. He shall be my God, and the stone which I have set as a pillar shall be God's house. And of that, and of all that you give me, he's telling God, of everything that you give me, I surely will give a tenth of you. Once again, the reference is to the tenth of everything God gives. So God had already planned to bless him anyway. He didn't have to make this deal with God, but Jacob didn't know God very well. So he decided, this is the way I'm going to, start my relationship with God and, say my part. What is my part in this whole relationship? He has already said that he's going to be with me, and I want to believe it. I'd like to believe it. And as a way of holding myself to this promise of believing the promise of God, I will give every tenth of everything that he gives me. So he's not doubting the fact that that God will give to him. He is holding himself to a pact, saying, when you give me, I will give back a tenth to you. So does God honor it? Oh, he does. God honors his word every time. We've already seen that several times, that God is not impartial. God always makes sure that his word doesn't return to him empty. So what happens is, when he gets to his uncle's house, like I said before, he marries there, and he has to face his father-in-law, or his uncle, former uncle, current father-in-law's deception. He faces deception many times. His father-in-law changes his wages many times, making it harder and harder for him to earn his wages. So and making it harder and harder for Jacob to prosper. So you see, even though Jacob had promised God that he will give him a tenth, he owned nothing. All that he owned till the time he was in his uncle's house belonged to his uncle. There was nothing that Jacob owned to honor the promise that he made to God, that he would give him a tenth of whatever God would give back to him. And all that was because Laban, his uncle, and his father-in-law, the same person, Laban, was cheating him every time. So what happens finally is, um, God tells him, God takes charge of Jacob's life, and you will find this book of Genesis, chapter 30. He says, he realizes that he has to get out of this bondage to his father-in-law, get out of this relationship with his father-in-law, and begin to earn for himself, create his own wealth. If he doesn't create his own wealth, he won't be able to honor God and fulfill his promise to give him a tenth. So unless you and I stop being slaves to this world and create wealth for ourselves, we will not be able to honor God with the tenth of our earnings. So we too have to put our foot down, not to our bosses. We too have to put our foot down on our own thoughts and our own, finances, which tries to rule over us, and say, no, you will not rule over me. I will rule over you. I understand that what is coming to me may not meet all my needs, but I will still take charge and keep away a tenth, give away a tenth to the purposes of God. I will do that to even my own hurt. So something like that had to happen with Jacob. So he had to take a stand. So he tells Laban, his father-in-law, that I have to go away. I have to go back to my own country. I have to meet my father again. So Laban tells him, in fact, Laban tells him something interesting. He says, Please stay, don't go. If I have found favor in your eyes, if I am, precious to you, stay back, because I have found something. I have learned from experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. It's like Laban was getting blessed because Jacob was in his family as his son-in-law, and was in his employ as a herdsman. So both of those things was blessing Laban, the father-in-law. So Laban didn't want to let go of Jacob. He knew where his money bags came from, where the source of his money bags was all from. It was Jacob who was the source of his blessing. So interesting that just by association, even if the person who's associated with you has no relationship with God, just because you are related to God, you belong to God, they will get blessed. So why not do something about your own blessing? Why allow somebody else to be get blessed because you belong to God? When are you going to take your cognizance? When are you going to recognize? When am I going to recognize our birthright as being the children of God, and totally depending on him, asking him, working with him to create wealth so that we can be a blessing, not just to people of this world, but to people who belong to God's family? When are we going to take that birthright? So, so Jacob tells him, I will continue to do this, but I will need to go back to my own house. So soon I will need to step away from you. So Laban tells me, name your wages, tells him, name your wages and I will give it. So Jacob says, I know what I want you to give me. I don't want you to give me anything of yours. God gives you ideas. So when Jacob was saying this, he had an idea that came from God, and that was what he was going to speak to Laban. All right. Later on in another chapter, you will see that the whole idea came from God Himself when He explains to His wives about that idea. So I will put the reference when I'm editing the video, and you will see where you can go and check that reference out and understand that the idea for how he explains his wages to be given to him comes from, where it comes from, and who gave him that idea. So Laban tells him, what shall I give you? And Jacob says to him, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep your flocks. All I want you to do is do something. I will continue to feed and keep your flocks, but I don't want you to give me anything. Just listen to what I say and allow that to happen. So, what is it that he says? Let me pass through all your flock today. Let me go through all the flock that you have in your ownership, and remove from them, take away from them all the speckled, meaning spotted sheep, and all the brown ones among the lambs. So if they were sheep, if they were grown up sheep, then they had to be speckled or spotted. And if they were young, they had to be brown. They can't be white, right? I will take them all out, and they shall be my wages. So my righteousness will answer for me in time to come, when the subject of my wages comes before you. Everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, brown among the lambs, will be considered stolen if it is with me. So he says, while I'm keeping and feeding your flocks, I will, they will continue to grow, because he is going to keep the flocks. The flocks are continuing to grow, but because he is in charge of keeping the flocks, he will only choose that which is speckled and spotted and brown, and he will take that as his wages. So Laban thinks, oh, that means to say he is going to take away most of my many a lot of my sheep, at least half of my sheep away. So what he does, he says, okay, all right, let me do this then. He calls his sons and he asks them to remove in the existing flock, in the set of existing flock. He asks his sons to remove. What he says is, oh, and Laban said, oh, that it were according to your word. Let it be what you say. He's like, I've got you, man. I'm going to make sure that you are not going to prosper, that you're going to be with me all your life, you're going to serve me. There's never going to be a day that you're going to get away from me. how will you manage to get speckled goat and speckled sheep if I take them all away now? So he is like trying his best to manipulate Jacob even in this. So what he does is, so he removed that day the male goats that were speckled and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, everyone that had some white in it, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and gave them into the hand of his sons. And he told them, put 3 days journey between himself and Jacob, and let Jacob feed the rest of Laban's flocks. So he made sure that his sons took away the existing ones so that Jacob couldn't walk away right then and there. He had to spend more time, invest more time in taking care of Jacob's flocks again. And this time he didn't have any speckled to take away with him as wages. What he had was flocks which were full bodied, solid colored flocks. There was none of them were spotted, speckled, or brown. So now Jacob was left with the fact that he had now to work again with this set of flocks to make sure that he'd get spotted, speckled, and uh, brown lambs. Now, how do you do that? Is there a way to do it, or do you have to depend on the grace of God? He did both. He found a way, and he depended on the grace of God. So what he did was, have you ever heard that when a person is expecting, when a lady is expecting, you surround her with beautiful pictures, beautiful scenery, and pictures of beautiful children are hung in a room so that whenever she opens her eyes, she sees beauty, and she sees wholesome children, pretty looking children, chubby children all around her. So there is, it is not an old wives' tale. It is something to do with what your eyes fix on, what your eyes can see, you can have them. It's a law that works every time. You eyes, whatever your eyes fix on, you can have them. But how do you want to have them? You want to manipulate the system to have them, or do you want to go to God and ask Him to give to you? That's the way God works. This way, you will get into trouble. You'll be called covetous, right? So, in the case of a pregnant woman, she can't covet really. She's looking for something for the one unborn child in her. So, it is never covetous for her. For her, it is the principle of what you can see is what you get. So, the same thing is applied by Jacob. So, what he does is he brings poplar, a green poplar, that's a kind of a tree, and he strips them, other trees too, almond trees, chestnut trees, green poplar trees, and he strips them in such a way that there are streaks in the trees, and he plants those poles near the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink. So he planted them there. So when the flocks came to drink, so they were always seeing that. And when they mated, they saw that. When they conceived, they saw that. So and then God works as well. When Jacob does his part, what he knows to do, he does his part, God works, and instantly the flocks of Laban start to give birth to speckled, spotted sheep. It's like as though they can't help themselves. They are doing that, and God blesses his efforts, and out they come as spotted and speckled sheep. So there's another verse in the Bible which says, whatever you put your hands to, that will be blessed. So whatever Jacob put his hands to was blessed. Laban had already seen that. He was blessed because of Jacob. Now Jacob was putting his hand to some work so that he could obey God, and he could keep his promise to God to give him a tenth. So that was blessed. So within years, a couple of years, all the sheep that Jacob had were speckled, spotted, or brown. The lambs were brown, and the older sheep were all speckled and spotted. And he was also very intelligent. He said what he did was, when the weak sheep mated, he didn't put the poplars in front of them. He didn't put the stripped wooden rods in front of them. When the strong sheep mated, only then did he put the rods. So all the strong sheep were speckled and spotted. All the strong sheep were Jacob's. All the weak ones were Laban's. So sooner than later, Laban's sons figured it out. They realized that suddenly Jacob had acquired so much wealth, so much wealth. In fact, what happened is, in the we are continuing the book of in the chapter 30, and it came to pass in verse 41, and it came to pass, whenever the stronger livestock conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the eyes of the livestock in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the flocks were feeble, he did not put them in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger were Jacob's. Thus the man Jacob became exceedingly prosperous. God's grace came on him like nobody's business. He became exceedingly prosperous, had large flocks. So you can see the uh, descriptors, the adjectives are, out uh, over the top. Exceedingly prosperous, large flocks, male and female servants, and camels and donkeys. So where did he get the servants and the camels and donkeys? He sold what he got because it was his wages, right? It was his wages. The spotted sheep, the speckled sheep were his wages. So he sold them and got more wealth. So he got male and female slaves and servants and camels and donkeys. He got them, and the sons of Laban figured out that now they were faced with the fact that they were not being prosperous, but Jacob was prospering, and he was prospering beyond anybody's imagination. Now, what happened was Jacob heard about this, the fact that Laban's sons were instigating Laban, his father in law, against him. So, what were they saying? Now, Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he has acquired all this wealth. He was certainly more wealthy than even Laban. And Jacob saw that the countenance of Laban changed and became less favorable toward him. It was not as favorable towards him as before. Then, at that point in time, the Lord speaks to Jacob and says, return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. So that's when Jacob leaves. And he leaves mm, very unceremoniously. There's no information. He calls his wives. He tells them that God gave him ideas, and because of what ideas God gave him, he has become very wealthy. And now it's time for him to go, and they should come along with him and the children, and they'd all go back to Isaac's house back in Canaan. So he sets out, and of course, Laban doesn't let go of the whole thing very easily. We are not going to go into the details of that, but he tries to stop him. Laban can get nothing to pin on Jacob and say, for this reason you can't go. There's nothing there. God has blessed him, and because God has blessed him, that day they part ways. So Laban has to give up Jacob's presence, and Jacob goes back. And when he goes back, now what is Jacob worried about? He has to face his brother. Remember, he talks about how he tells God, if you bring me back to my father's house in peace. Now he's thinking of that. How will I make peace with my brother? But now he has something with him to make peace. So, so he decides to segregate from his flocks different from different flocks, from the camels, from the donkeys, from the sheep, from all his flocks, from all his wealth. He decides to set apart lots of it, like hundreds and hundreds of things apart, so that he could give to his brother when he met him as a peace offering, saying that I'm sorry for what I did to you, but I'm no longer in need. I have grown in wealth. So here's my peace offering. Let's be friends again. So that is what he wants, and he does that. He sets it apart and sends it. In fact, he sends it ahead of him to meet his brother, because he gets to hear from people around him that his brother is coming to meet him with 400 people, 400 men. So he is suddenly worried. Oh my God, is my brother coming to have fight a war against me? If he did, then how will I do that? I have changed allegiance. I'm no longer the Jacob who went away from this land, who was a cheat, who was a deceiver. Now I am with God and He's changed me. And without deceiving, I have been able to acquire this wealth that I have got today. And today, God has blessed me not just with flocks and sheep and wealth, He has blessed me with a huge family, 2 wives and 11 sons. I've got all of these people with me and all these female and male servants with me. I am I'm blessed because I obeyed God. I listened to Him, I followed Him, and I did what He told me to do, and that's why I'm blessed. I don't want to fight my brother, so that's why I'm sending this peace offering. So now what do I do? So he sends across a peace offering, and again he prays to God, and this time God comes through and tells him that he doesn't have to worry. So it's an interesting event. You can check it out in the book, in the same book of Genesis, and you can check it out in chapter 32, where he gets a blessing from God, and the event happens from verse 22 all the way up till verse 29. Then, after he does that, he sets out and he meets his brother. And his brother, when he meets him, is not, thankfully, not out to get him, not out to kill him. But when he meets him, he does have a question. He says, "What do you mean by all this company which I met?" Because when Jacob's when Jacob sends out the gift, each contingent of the gift, it's a contingent of gifts. So it's not just one or two, it's hundreds and hundreds. So each contingent is accompanied by a servant, and each servant is supposed to tell Esau when he meets him that this is a gift from your brother Jacob. This is a gift for you from your brother Jacob. So Esau is very puzzled. It's like, what's that? I mean, I didn't ask for any gifts. Why is Jacob giving me gifts? So when he meets up, and actually Esau meets up with Jacob, he asks him, "What do you mean by all this company which I met?" And he said, and Jacob tells him, "These are to find favor in the sight of my Lord." He calls him an elder brother. "My Lord, you are my Lord." So not capital L, a small l. So you're my elder brother. So it is to gain favor from you. So Esau tells him, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." So Esau was also blessed because he was also from the same family. You see, God doesn't. God is not partial. He was going to bless Esau, but he was only going to make Esau second to Jacob. But they didn't know how to get those blessings without controversy. So that's why they were stuck in such a bad situation. Now it seems that Esau had figured it out that he was blessed also, and but not as much as Jacob, because Jacob was the one God had chosen. But he was blessed anyway. He says, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." But look at the words that Esau is using. I'm going to point this out because there's a specific reason to understand that when you are in a relationship with God, it is not enough. The enough word is very limiting to God. It's not it's not like God to limit the blessings that He gives to you. When He is in charge of your life, when you make Him your Lord for everything that you do and for all that you have, He doesn't bless you with just enough. He blesses you with all. So, what does Esau say? "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." And Jacob said, "No, please, if I have now found favor in your sight, then receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face as though I had seen the face of God. For me, your face is now as beloved as the face of God." So Jacob was a completely changed man. God had changed him. The moment Jacob gave his life up to God, it was like as though God fulfilled his promise and kept him through all that trauma and turmoil, and changed him in such a way that his only focus was what God says to him, and that's what I'm going to do. It become that different of a person from the Jacob who had cheated his older brother, who had deceived his father, right? So then he says, and is as though I'd seen the face of God and you were pleased with me. That's what I'm expecting of you. that you are pleased with me, because God is pleased with me. So he says, please take my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me. He's telling him that I don't deserve, I'm not worthy of all that I own. Everything that's come to me is God's grace on me. I couldn't have figured this out myself. There was no way I could figure out my relationship with God. There was no way I could figure out how to create wealth. There was no way I could figure out how to obtain all this wealth that I have and have a family. I couldn't have figured this out on my own. God was gracious to me, and that's why I have. And because I have now, he uses the word enough, but in the original Greek, in the original Hebrew, the word enough that Jacob uses in Hebrew means all. For Esau, it was just enough. For Jacob, it was all, because his allegiance had changed. His allegiance was now with God. His faithfulness was toward God. His loyalty now was toward God, not to something that was that he wanted to grab. He didn't want to grab the birthright. He didn't want to grab the blessing, but God's presence was the blessing that he wanted and that he had. And because he had that, he had it all, everything. And so he urged him like that, and Esau takes it, and there is peace in the family. So this is the life of Jacob, and you can see that all is radical. You can't really have all, but Jacob had all, everything that people of that day and age could think of as being indicative of wealth. All that Jacob had. And he had 11 sons to boot. And more than that, he had, the blessing of God. God had changed him. He had all of that. So he had all. So the things that we can learn from through Jacob's life, I think we have talked about it quite a bit through the teaching. If you have missed any of it, you can go through it again and pick it up, because I would really like you to like the video, share it, comment on it, subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon, and share it with somebody you think will benefit from this whole teaching. And if you feel led by God in your relationship with God, if you feel led from Him to give to this channel, you're welcome to do that. If God leads you to give to this channel, you can send it to the telephone number 935547129, and the mode will have to be PhonePe. So you can do that. And if you do send a gift, do write to me at stkogchannel2020@gmail.com, and I will send you a free ebook as my appreciation for what you have given. Thank you very much. Have a great day, all of you, and I hope you will be blessed, that God will bless your socks off as you decide to give to Him and be generous with the people around you. Yeah, you can give to Him in a lot of ways. Ask Him, and He will tell you how to do that. He loves to speak to His people, He loves to tell them, He loves to reveal to them His heart. So ask Him and get to know it and do it. So, God bless you, all of you, in Jesus' name. Take care. Bye bye.